I suppose I was just wondering what to do next. And David said, well, it's funny you should call, but our guitarist is leaving. I've got this really interesting thing that I think you'll like. Why don't you come down and see if you like it? So I did that. I went to London to see him when I got back from Canada, and it was what he called a multimedia experience. So playing acoustic guitars, singing harmonies. That was good fun. Completely different to being in a rock band. It was very much an acoustic, experimental kind of thing. I remember Pink Floyd were knocking around at the same time, and I kind of wondered if we were anything like them. But I never saw them, so I have no idea. Probably we weren't. I think we had David and Hermione dancing. David was doing mime. One of my jobs was to turn the tape machine on so that he would mime to it. And it was very controlled. It wasn't rock and roll.
In 1969, Bowie moved back to Bromley. While continuing his work in mime, he arranged folk nights at the 3 Tons pub in Beckenham. Here, he met Keith Christmas, a folk singer who regularly played the Sunday night session.
I can remember him as a 12-string strummer of the acoustic guitar, and as a writer of not very good songs. And he was the resident at the 3 Tons in Beckenham, round about 1969. It was the best club on earth. It was brilliant, that place. It was fabulous. It was so 60s. It was so late 60s London. It was the archetypal late 60s gig. If you wanted, I mean, folk music, acoustic music ruled. I mean, it absolutely ruled the earth. I mean, Bob Dylan to start it all, but it ruled the planet. And bands ruled the planet, and long hair and smoking. But of course, if you wanted to smoke, you still had to go and be very discreet because it was still very illegal. He tended to stay in the background a bit. He wasn't very obtrusive. He ran the club, and he booked me, and I was one of his favourite guests. So I got regular work there. And he used to open up the evening and strumming. He used to play 12-string, and he used to strum. And he used to open up the evening and sing a couple of songs, and that was it. Nobody really took too much notice of him. He was a really nice bloke. I mean, he was very South London, very middle class. He came across that way. Very nice, very quiet, unassuming. I had the feeling he was a bit of a scamp. I always got the feeling he had a sense of mischief about him, and he had a twinkle in his eye, that's for sure.
Although he involved himself in various projects, Bowie's career seemed to be heading nowhere. Despite all his hard work, fame appeared to be an elusive dream.
He was on tour with Mark Bolan, and this presumably must have been some kind of low point in his career, because he wasn't even singing at that stage. He was doing a mime act, and I'm not much of an authority on mime, but you know, he'd be doing that kind of man locked in a phone box, kind of, you know, all this sort of thing. And I remember we treated him, I hope politely, but you know, it wasn't seen as a great coup having him on the tour. And I think he was even, there was the rarest of God's creatures, an Australian sitar player on the bill as well. And I'm not entirely sure that Bowie wasn't even billed below him. But I remember sitting in the theatre in Liverpool and sort of, oh God, is it 8 o'clock already? David, you're on, kind of thing, shouting down the corridor, and he'd go out and do his act. So I mean, he was a fairly, you know, humble. He was in a fairly humble position, really, at that stage.
I think he could have, from time to time, wondered if he was ever going to crack it, because I don't think it was so much that he was from out of London. I think even in those days, certainly we from the north thought that Bromley, Beckenham was London. I think that right deep down, he just had a very strong belief in himself. Stronger than I thought he had, actually. I kept leaving. But I realise now that he had a very strong belief in himself, yeah.
You've got to have huge drive and ambition to be successful. There's an awful lot of people out there who've got lots of drive and ambition without any talent, who you've got to compete with. It's no use just having the talent and expecting it to be discovered. So you've got to have that incredible belief in yourself. Yeah, I think so.
Certainly in today's sort of pop idol culture, David Bowie would not have existed. He would have, you know, after his second single, he would have disappeared, or he might have had a career on the pub circuit.
I think I did believe that he would make it, yeah. I always thought that he would make it, to be honest. I didn't think it would be as big as it is now, but I did believe he would make it, yes.
In my limited experience, people only tell you that they saw genius blossoming after the genius has blossomed, and with the gift of hindsight. So I would love to be able to say, yes, as soon as he walked into the room, I detected something magical about David Bowie, and time has proven me right. But that would be complete bollocks, frankly, and I think anybody who tells you that is probably lying.
In the end, it was one song that set Bowie on the road to glory. Despite his difficult start, by the end of 1969, Bowie had entered the public eye and achieved the first of many hits.
I can remember seeing the Stones in the park, and there was a million people there, and it was hot that day. And before the Stones came on, in between, I can't remember, it was Donovan or somebody like that, they played Space Oddity, and it had just come out, and it was just starting to go in the charts, and it just fitted like a glove. You could just tell this was going to be huge, and I knew then he was going to be huge. That's when I knew.
We actually recorded several songs that we'd used in our Feathers act, and also after Hermione had left, we did a few gigs as Bowie and Hutch, and we decided we'd put them on a Revox. We had a machine in his flat, and we recorded maybe a dozen songs, and Space Oddity was just one of them. And that was to send to America. Eventually, it was the tape that was to get him a record deal after I'd left. But we basically just sat on the corner of the bed and played through the songs. But then, a little bit later, we made what was to be a promotional film. The three of us, Hermione, David and myself, made what is still available as Love You Till Tuesday. And for that film, we went into a studio and we employed, or David employed, some session musicians, and we recorded what they now call the original version of Space Oddity. Space Oddity was written as a two-part song. I was ground control and he was Major Tom, and we recorded it with that in mind. We sang those two parts. After I'd left, gone back to get another day job, David did it as a solo.
The solo version of Space Oddity became Bowie's calling card. It secured him a lucrative deal with Mercury Records, and on its release in autumn 1969, found an audience enticed both by the subject matter and by the artist.
It was at the time of the man first landed on the moon. People were fascinated by it. People were obsessed with space. And it was a pun on 2001, the Stanley Kubrick film, 2001, A Space Odyssey. So this was called Space Oddity, which was a pun on that, which obviously everyone got straight away. And so it was immediately very intriguing, because it was a very unusual subject to write a song about.
It coincided with the first space shot, and it had, with that kind of ethereal voice he's got, it fitted exactly the style of music at the time. It just fitted perfectly. It fitted the time, fitted what people wanted. I mean, I personally thought it was a bit of a depressing song because the guy dies in it, but it was very clever, very unique.